Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my April reading wrap up. I cannot believe we have now completed 1/3 of the year. Like, this year is going so quickly, but like low-key slow at the same time. Like every single day it feels slow, but then when I think back to the fact that we've been in this year for 4 months, it does not feel like it's been that long. In my March reading wrap up, I gave you guys statistics about the books that I read, and I'm gonna do that again this month. I almost forgot to add them into this video, but I am going to do it. So in the month of March, I read a total of 10 books, and I also had one book that I did not finish. Those 10 books equaled 4,059 pages, which sounds like a lot, but I think I had like 5,000 pages last month, so it's definitely less than last month. My average rating for the books was 4.075, and that sounds really high considering there was a lot of books that I did not really love this month, which obviously I will get into. And out of the books that I set myself on my April TBR, I believe I only read one book, which is really bad. I'm quite disappointed in myself with that outcome. Now that I've gone through the breakdown of the books themselves, I'm going to tell you the genre breakdown of these books. I read 2 romance books, 5 mystery/thriller books, which I was not expecting, and 3 fantasy books. Now that I've told you guys all of the statistics, we can get straight into the actual book wrap up. So in no particular order, the first book that I've completed in April was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. Now, if I'm being honest, I've actually been listening to the audiobook for this since March, so it's kind of been over like a 2-month journey of listening to this, because obviously it's a thick book, like it's like 800 pages, and so it did take me a while to get through the audiobook. But can I just say, I am so glad that I'm finally finished the ACOTAR series. I started it like a year ago and that was already delayed. Like, I feel like people read it so long ago and I was already so late to the train, and then it took me so long to actually complete the series. Now that I have, I'm so happy because it means that I can finally start the Throne of Glass series, which is something that's been on my mind a lot. I feel like I'm definitely going to be a Throne of Glass girl. I obviously can't really talk about this book too much because it is the 5th book in the series, but I am definitely a Nesta girl, and so I loved getting her book and I loved getting her point of view. Even though I gave this book 4 stars, I do think that this was one of my favorites in the series for sure. The only thing that dropped it from being a lower rating was the fact that I feel like it was just way too long, and I feel like the same thing was going on like over and over again. It felt very repetitive, and I found myself getting bored through a lot of it. I feel like if I was reading this as a physical book and not as an audiobook, I probably would have like soft DNF'd it, but because I was listening to it as an audiobook, I could really take my time with it, which made me enjoy it more. I just feel so accomplished now that I've finished this series because I've been putting it off for so long. I'm so glad to have this ticked off my list. The next book I read in a reading vlog, so if you've been keeping up with my channel, you probably saw me read this, and it was such an anticipated release for me, probably my most anticipated release, and that was Taming Seven by Chloe Walsh. I have seen nothing but negative things about this book. Like, people were just expecting something so different from what they actually got, and a lot of people are upset that they didn't get Lizzie and Huey's story first, and they're upset about a character that was like really rude in this book and everything like that. But I read this before all of those negative reviews came out, and so I could form my own opinion, and I gave this book 6 stars. I think it was absolutely perfect. The only thing that I will say is that I wish it was longer, because most of Chloe Walsh's books are like 800 pages, but this one was only 550, and I wanted more. Considering this is the only book we're getting for Claire and Gibbsy, I just wish we had more of them, because I love their relationship so much and I love their banter and I just love them being together. And I'm honestly just so sick of seeing the hate towards this book. I'm so sick of just seeing people judge others for what they enjoy as well. Like, people are allowed to like this book, because I absolutely loved it, and I have seen a few other people love this as well, but I also feel like I'm like the minority in that, because I feel like I've seen nothing but negative things about this. I've just seen hate on the fact that it's not the book people wanted, and I'm not going to say the name, but the character in this that was very problematic, I didn't really like them throughout the rest of the series anyway, so I honestly didn't care, and I feel like that's an unpopular opinion. The next book I read was Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. So I just sat down this week and I saw that this was on Kindle Unlimited, and I've been seeing very good reviews of this recently, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna pick this up because I need like a bit of a brain break from what I was reading. And let me tell you, it did not disappoint. But also, don't take this as a recommendation, because you definitely need to look up trigger warnings before going into this book. This is actually a story about pedophilia, so it's a very sensitive topic, and the 2 main characters are pretty much a mother and son. So the mother's 15-year-old son went to this kind of like correction facility, I believe, because he did something wrong. I don't know how to explain it, because you can't explain it until you actually read it, but this book gave me so many conflicting emotions, because I felt bad for the boy, but I also hated him for what he did, and you will not understand until you actually go into this book. It is so upsetting and so sad. Oh my god, the ending of the book absolutely broke me. I was not expecting to cry, but I sat there, I kid you not, there for like 3 or 4 hours straight and binged this whole book. Like, I could not put it down. I had to know what was going to happen at the end, and I don't know if I'm happy with the ending. I feel like it was so depressing and I cannot explain and I can't tell you guys anything about this. I feel like you mainly have to go into it blind, knowing the trigger warnings. I absolutely loved this. I wasn't expecting to, and I ended up giving it 4 stars, which is really high. And I also just really like this author's writing style, and I definitely want to read more of this author's work. The next book I read in April was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I also read this in another reading vlog, so if you want to see my opinions as I was reading this, it was in my swapping screen time for reading video. Now, I had a friend actually annotate this for me. She annotated this for me and Crooked Kingdom, which I haven't gotten to yet, but I feel like her annotations really like accentuated my experience reading this book. It made me love it so much more, and I knew that I was going to like this book because I've seen nothing but positive things about it, and I knew that I wouldn't hate it or anything like that. So this became a book that I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with the characters in this book. I did give it 4 stars. It definitely wasn't a 5-star feeling for me, but that being said, I do feel like Crooked Kingdom will be a 5-star read because now that we've established the world and the characters and all of that fun stuff, I feel like the second book will be much better because it's already all set up. I don't even know how to explain the synopsis of this book. I feel like most of you have probably heard of this, but it is a fantasy. It's following 6 main characters, so we get like 6 different point of views in this book, which I love. I love a book where we get a bunch of different point of views because it just makes me feel so much more connected to the story, and it's so much more page turning that way. My favorite character so far is Nina, but I feel like that might change within the next book. I'm not entirely sure, but I loved her character in this book. I'm just going to read a bit of the back if you don't know the synopsis because I don't know how to explain it. Criminal prodigy Kaz Brecker has been offered a chance at a deadly heist, break into the Ice Court, a military stronghold that has never been breached, and retrieve a hostage whose knowledge could change Grisha magic forever. It says to succeed would mean riches beyond Kaz's wildest dreams, but he can't pull it off alone. And then it just says like a little description of each of the characters. It definitely felt slow and boring for me at some points in the book. That's why it wasn't a 5-star read, because there was a lot of world building to establish, and because I've never watched or read Shadow and Bone, I feel like I really had to concentrate so I would understand what was going on, and I did end up understanding everything, so it was fine. And yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by this. Next up we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now, I read this as part of a reading vlog too, I believe, and I honestly don't really have much recollection of this book. Pretty much it's about these 2 ladies, and they are both authors. One of them is quite famous and one of them really isn't famous at all. One night they go out together and they go back to one of their apartments, I believe, and the really famous author passes away in a really tragic way. And because this author that's like really trying to be successful is in her apartment at this time, she actually finds her manuscript and steals it before she calls the ambulance to try to come and save her friend. So we go on from there. We go on following this author that has stolen her dead best friend's work. I wasn't really expecting a lot of aspects of this book. I really liked how it showed racism in this book. I feel like it was very eye-opening and very important to read about as well. I feel like I had a fun time reading this. I still read it in a couple of days, but it just didn't have me as hooked as I was expecting it to, and so I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. The next book I read was The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This is a mystery slash thriller, and it's following this disappearance that occurs in this apartment block, and each chapter we're getting a different character's point of view. So there's like 5 or 6 different point of views that we're getting in this book as well. And pretty much this man who goes missing in this apartment's sister comes to visit him, and she's the one that starts this whole investigation into what happened to him. And honestly, the idea of this book and the storyline that I thought it was going to go down was really intriguing and really interesting. I feel like the way it was executed was so confusing, and it just put me in a massive reading slump, and I wanted to enjoy this book so badly, but I didn't know what was going on. I feel like I was just reading words and they were going straight over my head. Like, I feel like there was no real explanation. I just didn't really understand the way that the book all came together, and I felt really confused at the end, which I hate feeling in a thriller book. Like, I need closure and I need to know what happened. So I ended up giving this 2.75 stars, unfortunately. The next book I read I absolutely loved, and that was Powerful by Lauren Roberts. This is a novella following Adina's story that comes after Powerless, and I can't really say much about this without spoiling anything either, but I was so happy to get Adina's story. I'm so happy that her story was told in such a beautiful way. I just loved this book so much. It was such a cute romance. I don't know what I really expected going into this, but the romance was so sweet, and reliving what happened in Powerless was absolutely heartbreaking. Like, if you know, you know. I was not expecting to cry in the end of this book because, as I said, it is a novella. It was only like 250 pages, so it took me like a couple of hours to read, and I wasn't expecting to cry, but I did in fact sob at the end of this book. I didn't think I was going to, but getting the whole backstory and everything like that just really impacted me, and because I just love Adina so much, it just really hurt. And this was a 5-star read. Like, I wasn't expecting it to be a 5-star read because, as I said, it's a novella and you don't really get much to a novella normally, but I feel like this gave me everything I wanted and more, and there was so much information put into this book in the best way possible. Then I read The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson, which is her new mystery / thriller release. And let me tell you, this is going to be coming out in a reading vlog very soon, where I'm reading my most anticipated releases. I'm like just finishing up that video now, so it'll probably come within the next week or so. I liked this book. I did. It took me a really long time to get into it. Like, I feel like I didn't really get into it until like 60% of the way through, which is really long. And because I loved 5 Survive from Holly Jackson, and I loved the Good Girls Guide to Murder trilogy because they had me hooked from the beginning, this one really didn't. It's following our main character Belle, whose mum went missing like 16 years ago, and 16 years later her and her family are filming this documentary about what happened to her mum and all of that. And then all of a sudden her mum reappears. That's why it's called The Reappearance of Rachel Price, because that's like the name of the documentary in the book. No one knows where she's been. There's not really anything explained, and so that's what we're trying to find out throughout the book, which sounds like a really cool concept. But as I said, it just took me so long to get into it, and once I did get into it, I did really enjoy it, and it definitely upped my rating. But the whole experience overall of reading this book was not that great for me. It took me 2 weeks to get through this book because I was in such a massive slump, and this was not helping whatsoever. I feel like a lot of people normally recommend Holly Jackson's books when you're in a reading slump, but this one just didn't do it for me. I don't know what it really was. I just didn't love it as much as her other books, so I gave it 3.5 stars, which is still a really good rating, but that's only because the last like 30 to 40% was really amazing and really had me intrigued. Then I read His and Hers by Alice Feeney, which was such an amazing book. Let me just start off by saying that. I'm gonna read a bit of the back to you guys because it's really hard to explain this book. So it says 3 words to describe my wife: beautiful, ambitious, unforgiving. I only need 1 word to describe my husband: liar. So it's following a ex-husband and wife. The husband, I believe, is a police officer, and then the wife was like a news reporter. So in this town someone is murdered, and so they're kind of like working on this together but from completely different point of views, and they're like also butting heads at the same time because they're ex-husband and wife, which I loved that aspect of it. I really loved seeing the drama in this book as well. And it also says at the back of the book, there's Anna's ex-husband DCI Jack Harper is suspicious of her involvement until he becomes a suspect in his own murder investigation. So this book was absolutely crazy. It had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. I think I read it in a couple of days. Like, I was so hooked by this book. And I've read one other book from Alice Feeney, which was Rock Paper Scissors, and I felt the exact same within that book. I think this book was absolutely phenomenal. Like, if you need a thriller to actually get you out of a slump, I highly recommend this. And then the last book I read was In Perfect Harmony by Kylie Watt. I read this one on my Kindle. This was just such a cute, cozy little romance. It was a great palette cleanser, and it was only like 300 pages, so it was very quick to get through. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It's following a famous singer and his new personal assistant, and I just loved that dynamic so much. Like, I love when a personal assistant gets hired to like make the guy's reputation a lot better, because that's exactly what this book was, and I loved that about it. The only negatives that I have about this that a lot of people would really like is that it was very insta-lovey, and that's not something that I normally go towards within a book. But as I said, it was such a quick and easy read anyway, so it was just a great palette cleanser. And it was also quite spicy, which I feel like I'm one of the only people to complain about spice, and it was quite spicy for my liking. But overall, I really liked this book, and I gave it 3.5 stars. So now that I've gone through the 10 books that I did read, I'm going to tell you the book that I DNF'd, and that was Betting on You by Lynn Painter. When I tell you guys, I am so disappointed about DNFing this book, because I've read I think 3 or 4 other books from Lynn Painter, and I've absolutely loved all of them. So I really don't know where she went wrong with this book and with me, because I've seen so many people reading this and loving it. I don't think I've seen any negative reviews about this until my own. I believe I got like 150 pages in, and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I was physically cringing at the pages, and so many just weird, crazy things were happening. I honestly cannot tell you if the characters were like 15 years old or 30 years old. I still don't know. There was like this one thing that got me in particular, which is what actually caused me to DNF this book, and that was when our main male character was at a party and he got asked like what song he wanted them to put on, and he chose All Too Well 10-minute version, and that just really irked me out, and I just could not. After I read that, I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. Even I wouldn't choose that song at a party. Like, it just made absolutely zero sense. Like, I'm still cringing thinking about this book. I'm so sorry if you guys liked this book, and I'm still a Lynn Painter stan. I still love her, but this book was just not it for me, unfortunately. So yeah, that sums up the 10 books that I read in April and the 1 book that I DNF'd in April. I feel like it was not a very great reading month for me. Now that I look back on my ratings, I feel like there was a lot of quite good ratings within this month, but I didn't really have many 5-star reads. I think my only 5-star reads were Powerful by Lauren Roberts and Taming Seven, which was technically a 6-star read. So I really didn't have many successful books within this month in terms of 5-star ratings. I'm not a harsh rater at all, so for me to have like no 6-star reads, that's really crazy. But yeah, hopefully the month of May is more successful. I've already read a couple of books since May started and they've been great already, so I'm very excited about that. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you've gotten to the end of this video. Make sure to stay and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. I would really appreciate it. And with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next one.